I'm talking to you today about, good luck, the Book of Ruth. It's a story of perfect law. Just to kind of give you a background about the Bible, just a little bit, a lot of you already know. The Old Testament is called the Tanakh, that's the Hebrew Bible. Or if you're a more modern Jew, it's called the Nach. Number one, this book is set apart from the rest of the Bible because it has little to no supernatural events taking place. The Book of Ruth, was the first line, is distinct from the rest of the Bible because it's little to no supernatural, the second line, events taking place. Which is really cool because its value is not found in God being overly present. It's the culture that is being represented here. So the story its value is found in the cultural representations spread throughout the story. Representations is the line on number 2. This book is celebrated on the holiday called Shavuot. Shavuot is 50 days after Passover. This is when, if you think about it historically, this is when Moses received the law. So they also celebrate this book with it because it's relevant toward David's lineage as well. This is a story that displays law working toward its original design. It's a story of love and of tragedy and how life can ravage a family and how the culture of another can restore hope. Intermingled within this is themes of hospitality, loving kindness, and the perfect execution of Jewish laws concerning social justice, which is also loving kindness, which is coming to the widow, the poor, the orphan, taking care of the stranger, all hospitality. It's very important. This story starts off when there is a famine, which is a judgment upon Israel for worshiping other gods. There's a famine in Judah, the Judah region, which is down here by Bethlehem. And that's where this story takes off, because Elimelech, which is one of the characters, and Naomi and their sons, Mahlon and Chilion, flee Bethlehem for Moab due to a famine. So Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, and her sons, Mahlon and Chilion, flee Bethlehem from Moab due to a famine. Their father's death came shortly after their arrival to Moab. So Naomi at this point is a widow. And they're not in Jerusalem. So the Moabite culture, which is the Canaanite culture, is different from the Jewish culture. Follow along with this. So the Book of Ruth is celebrated. The story begins with the backstory of the characters of Ruth. A lot more nervous than I thought it'd be.
You're doing fine.
They went across the River Jordan to the country of Moab, which is right next to Jerusalem. So if you think about the Dead Sea, is right around here. And where Jordan is today, that's where the country of Moab would be. Moab is actually descendants from Lot. Lot, if you know the story of Lot, I'll give you a real quick backstory. Lot was fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah, and according to their history, his wife looked back and God turned her to a pillar of salt, and they fled to the mountainous regions. I think it's a little past the Dead Sea, where the daughters of Lot got him drunk and raped him and had children. One of them was Amnon, and the other was Moab. So you can kind of see the descendants of these people. So in this story, Mahlon and Chilion pass away, making widows of Ruth and Orpah, who were married to both Mahlon and Chilion for about 10 years, the story says. And eventually they pass away, and Naomi's left without sons, without a husband, and in a patriarchal society that leaves her alone. And so it's very important to understand this part of it. This is why she goes back to Bethlehem, where she's originally from. And she tells the daughters, Ruth and Orpah, to to go ahead and she dismisses them back to their Moabite culture, to their own gods, to their own people. And Orpah decides to leave, and Ruth decides to stay. What you see here with Ruth is the fact that she denied her own culture and was willing to help Naomi and display loving kindness beyond anything else you could think of. This is actually the forming of a covenant, which is one of the biggest cultural laws of Israel. They form a covenant with God. They form a covenant with each other. A covenant is a relationship. It's a bond between two people, usually consisting of a life together. So you cleave together. So you're no longer two people. You are now one. So for all intents and purposes, Naomi is inseparable from Ruth. They cannot go anywhere without each other. So when she says, your God will become my God, and Ruth, in the first chapter of Ruth, verses 16 and 17, and your people will be my people, and your ways will be my ways, I am, in a sense, becoming a part of your family that's far beyond just the marriage itself. In chapter 2, the story progresses to when they're at Bethlehem, and Ruth notices Boaz, who is a close relative to Elimelech. So Naomi hears the crops growing in Bethlehem, decides to return, and upon their return, after a while, Ruth notices Boaz. She starts taking a keen eye to him, and she goes up to him and she seeks a job harvesting wheat on a farm belonging to Elimelech's relative Boaz. Boaz is smitten with her, smitten with probably a mixture of who she was and what she did, her courage that she has. So Boaz is impressed by the courage displayed by Ruth and pays close attention to her, special attention, giving her food, to take extra food at the end of the harvest day. She lets her work with the field of men, which is definitely an elevated status of a woman in this particular culture. So Boaz took notice of Ruth, mainly because of her kindness that she had shown to Naomi, which you can see in Ruth chapter 2, verse 12. And I actually got that right here. I can read it out to you. It said, the Lord may repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you. And the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Because she asked him, why would you even notice me? Why would you even give me a job? Because I'm a foreigner, which is the next part of hospitality that they offer. She is a foreigner to his country. And a Moabite is not favored by Israel by any means. They're mortal enemies, much like the Philistines and them. God had declared a curse on them that not a single Moabite should belong in Israel's culture. So they looked at them with disdain. Not only is she a foreigner, not only is she suffering culture shock right at this moment, she is dealing with an aging and probably dying woman in Naomi. And they are depressed, without probably a home, and destitute. And she comes upon the kindness of Boaz, and she's probably thinking this guy is a world saver. So, what was I at last? After many months, Ruth is encouraged by Naomi to offer herself to Boaz, who acts as a kinsman redeemer of Naomi's property and belongings. This is an important part of Levitical law as well. It's a very big part of their culture. If you are a widow and you have a close relative to the husband, they can be a redeemer of the property so that your name, your husband's name, will continue on and the property will remain in the family line. If not, it just get left to the state and you get left on the streets. So it's important to understand what a kinsman redeemer is. But what happened in this part of the story, Naomi encouraged Ruth to go lay down at the feet of Boaz after he got done threshing wheat. and she was covered at this point. She covered his feet. And this is very important symbolism here. When she covers his feet, I believe it was either his lower half of his body or his feet with her cloak, she's asking him to take her into his world. She's basically saying, "You want to marry me?" And Boaz turns around and says, "Your heart is amazing. I love you. I want to, but I can't because there's another relative that's really closer than me, and I need to go and ask them if we can do this because you have to follow the letter of the law." And Boaz went and had a meeting with the elders. He called them together, and he asked them and said, "Would you want to take on Naomi's debt and her property and absorb it into any of your houses?" And they all said no. One specifically said, "I am afraid that if I do, I will lose all my wealth and all my property." It was probably mainly to do with the fact that Ruth was also a part of that. She's a Moabite. And that would look bad on you. But Boaz didn't care. Eventually, he said, "Fine, I'm going to take it." So they have a culture where they take off the sandal. I think it's on their right or left foot. I can't remember exactly. But they take off the sandal and they lay it down at each other. And that is an agreement of passing on the torch, if you will, to the next of kin. So now Boaz is free to marry Ruth and take on the debt of Elimelech so that his name will carry on. So in this you see also a point of hospitality, a point of culture, a point of loving kindness where Boaz takes in a foreigner, Ruth. He relieves the pain of Naomi's losses with her husband and her children. He gives of himself to also Naomi to give her reward for what she did to Ruth, or not Naomi, to Ruth when she came with Naomi. So a covenant, just to review, is a bond or relationship formed for economic, social, or personal means. Loving kindness is the largest theme in the story. It's on display when Ruth cleaves to Naomi and Boaz accepts Ruth. Love is the main idea of this. Love is really the main idea of this story. It's not the physical intimacy, but the acts of kindness and charity despite the chaotic world they lived in. They loved selflessly. And it's very important to understand that theme of being selfless, trying to abstain from the hubris around the culture of being prideful, being fleshly, of giving into your desires, because usually it incurs selfishness. Also in this theme is a theme against fate. There's a little bit of free will in this, and that's my opinion. And I didn't write it on there because I was unsure of whether to bring this up, but I think it's really cool. Life in and of itself is chaotic. It's randomly about at its own pace. Famines and tornadoes and earthquakes happen, and a situation. It's how you respond to it. And though God does bring down judgment upon Moab and judgment upon Bethlehem, He didn't bring judgment upon Naomi or her family. It was just the process of life. She was left destitute. And so now you see that they have to make their own way in this world. And I believe that that's a big theme of this book. So you see that law is very important to this culture, and its effect is far beyond just justice and social justice. It affects the way they live. It affects the way they move about. It affects how they live in this life. So that's the theme of Ruth, the Book of Perfect Law.
Well done.
Good.
Three good presentations.
Those stories get a little complicated when you're reading them and to sort all that out. It's hard.